peristalsis, mixed feeling, time, gastric acidity. Okay. So now we're going to talk a little bit about the histology of the stomach. And we'll actually look at where the hydrogen ions and the chloride is secreted, and how the stomach protects itself. Okay. So there are several cells in the stomach that I'm going to want you guys to be familiar with. If you look here, so this is the lumen. All right, Catherine, is one of those off? Okay, never mind. This is the lumen of the stomach. This is the mucosal layer here. All right, and this is the submucosa. All right, this is that lamina propria, right, where all the vessels are. So you can see here these deep folds in the mucosal layer, right? Again, increasing surface area, okay? The other things that these deep folds do is they form what are called gastric pits, which you can see here. And at the bottom of those gastric pits are all of these cells that secrete hydrogen ions, chloride, gastrin goes into the blood, pepsinogen, intrinsic factor, all of the digestive enzymes that start the digestive process in the stomach. So gastric juice is not just acid, but it's also those enzymes that are being secreted as well. All right? And in addition to that, you have mucus cells. So what do you think mucus cells secrete? Mucus, exactly. So your stomach has a very healthy lining of mucus to protect it from the very acidic environment of the stomach, right? And for the most part, this is a simple polymer epithelial layer. The cells do reproduce very quickly and replace themselves because they do experience some damage. But that mucosal layer is really, or the mucosa, the mucus, is really important in preventing those cells from becoming damaged from this highly acidic environment. All right. So we'll talk about the mucus cells, the parietal cell, the Chi cells. We talked about the glands, and then the G cells. All right. So here again, you can see what the surface mucus cells actually look like. And so we're talking about two different functions here. We're talking about exocrine functions and endocrine functions. And you'll see this again a lot throughout the digestive system. So what does an exocrine gland do? It secretes a substance into the lumen of an organ, all right? So directly onto the surface of the organ. So an example of an exocrine gland here, or cell, would be those mucus cells. It's secreting mucus right onto the lumen of the organ, all right? You also have endocrine glands that will secrete a hormone called gastrin, and gastrin will actually stimulate the secretion of more hydrogen and chloride, okay? But it is a hormone, meaning it's secreted where? Into the bloodstream, yes. All right, so it's actually secreted, into the bloodstream, and then it acts on other stomach tissues or stomach cells to increase hydrogen and chloride secretion. Okay. All right, so let's look at each individual cell. Your parietal cells, these guys we talked about. Your parietal cells secrete hydrogen and they secrete chloride. They do not secrete them together. They secrete them separately and then they join in the stomach, all right? They don't want to form hydrochloric acid inside of the cell because that's going to damage the cell, all right? So it secretes it out, and then in the lumen of the stomach it joins where it can't cause damage to the individual cells themselves. Chief cells secrete pepsinogen and gastric lipase. Okay, so you have parietal cells secrete hydrogen and chloride and intrinsic factor. Chief cells secrete pepsinogen and and gastric lipase. Okay, and then G cells secrete gastrin, which is the hormone I was telling you about. And gastrin is going to stimulate parietal cells and chief cells. All right, so that you secrete more hydrogen chloride and so that you secrete more pepsinogen and gastric lipase. Okay? So, what does hydrochloric acid do? Hydrochloric acid does a few things. All right, one, it degrades microbes in the stomach, so that's great. Two, it's necessary for activation of a lot of these enzymes that are going to be required to break down other products. And three, it starts denaturing proteins. Okay? It kills microbes. It activates digestive enzymes like what? Lingual lipase, pepsinogen, and gastric lipase. All right? And 1, 2, 3, it denatures proteins. So you have to remember, some of you may not have had chemistry yet, but proteins come in this big, like, complex structure, right? They're just like these huge folds of amino acids, okay? And you have to unfold them and then clip off the amino acids, all right, as you're digesting it. So what we're going to see is proteins take a long time to digest, all right? High protein foods are going to spend the most time in the stomach because it takes a long time to unfold them and cut them into small enough pieces for them to move on into the small intestine, okay? Same thing with fats. Fats take a longer time to digest as well. So pepsinogen is one of those protein digesting enzymes, all right? So it breaks off the amino acids, okay? Pepsinogen doesn't do the digesting. Something called pepsin does. All right? So again, the same thing as with hydrochloric acid. If a chief cell makes pepsin inside of the cell itself, what is it going to do? Yeah, it's going to degrade itself. It's going to destroy all the proteins in the cell. All right? That is a bad idea. So what happens is the cell itself secretes pepsinogen. Pepsinogen gets into the stomach environment, that acidic environment, and it is broken apart into pepsin, which is the active form. And then pepsin can go and find all the proteins in the chyme and break them apart. Okay? And so it's not actually damaging the cells of the stomach itself. Does that make sense? Okay, so pepsinogen is what is secreted, but pepsin is the actual active enzyme. All right? So pepsin is responsible for protein digestion. This is where protein digestion begins. And gastric lipase is also responsible for lipid digestion. So thus far, in the stomach, we have 3 digestive enzymes in action. What are they? Lingual lipase, pepsin, and gastric lipase. Exactly. Salivary amylase is inhibited by the acidic environment. All right? Hydrochloric acid is also helping break down these particles, but it's not an enzyme. All right? It's just an acid. Okay? And intrinsic factor. Intrinsic factor is essential for vitamin B12 absorption. So intrinsic factor, vitamin B12, what is vitamin B12 necessary for? Energy, metabolism, red blood cell production, nervous system function, all right? It's pretty important in a lot of things, specifically red blood cell production. So there are some individuals who do not produce enough intrinsic factor. If you don't produce enough intrinsic factor, you get something called pernicious anemia, which used to be a fatal disease, which means that you don't produce enough red blood cells, you end up feeling fatigued. There used to be no treatment for it because if you can't absorb vitamin B12, how are you going to get it?
right? You can take all the medications you want, but if you're putting it into your stomach and you're not absorbing it into the bloodstream, you're not going to get it, right? So today, it's easily treatable. You can take vitamin B12 shots, and it's no big deal. But it has also been shown, so that's somebody who doesn't make intrinsic factor at all, right, or not enough of it. They're doing something called the Framingham study in Massachusetts. Hold on one second. Where they're basically looking at a whole group of people in a town. It's a pretty large subject group, thousands of people, where they're looking at them for 30 years over their lifespan, all right? And they just kind of make these measurements every single year. And they've shown that 40% of the people in that town do not absorb enough vitamin B12. So they absorb enough, like they have the minimum amount, but they don't have what's considered a healthy normal amount. All right, so what they're starting to say now, and this just came out within like the last year from Tufts University, what they're starting to say now is this might be a chronic kind of issue in the American population that for some reason, not really known, we're not absorbing vitamin B12 efficiently. So why is that? Does it have to do with our diet? Does it have to do with the health of our gut? They're not really sure. What kind of foods is vitamin B12 in? Do you know?
Is the orange? No. Is it the orange foods?
Is it grain?
Meat. Yes. It's in meat. It's in dairy. It's in eggs. It's in fish. Yeah. So it's namely a meat-based protein or vitamin. Yeah. So anyone who follows like a vegan or vegetarian diet is at risk for vitamin B12 deficiency. I will say it's not naturally found in grains, but most grains are fortified with B12. A lot of your foods are fortified with B12. So they even showed in that Framingham study that if people started eating fortified grains more often, they got their levels went up. Yeah.
What about nutritional yeast?
I'd have to look and see. I don't see why not. It would make sense for vegans. Yeah, and there are sources again for vegans. Grains, fortified grains will have B12 as well, right? But there might be more to it like that than that. Some of it could have to do with just the actual health of your gut, right? And if you're not, there are lots of digestive people out there who would say we don't absorb most of the good nutrients that we eat because we don't have a healthy intestinal lining. So I'm not an expert on that. I just find it interesting to read. I don't know how much of it is scientifically factual, I would say. All right. There's something else I was going to say. Yeah.
When you have like a gastric, like bypass surgery, like a gastric balloon, don't you have to get like B12 shots because your body's not producing on it?
Yeah, exactly. So you do. Or if you have some part of your stomach removed or some part of your intestine removed, you have to get vitamin B12 shots. And you can go to Walgreens and get vitamin B12 shots if you have a prescription for them. My husband teaches at a high school, and they come around every winter and give the flu shot, and you can also buy a vitamin B12 shot. So anybody can take them, all right? Whether you should or not, I don't know. I don't know if it's actually helpful or effective. I don't know if half of you would be considered on the low end of absorbing B12 or not. I will say that as aging is also shown to reduce intrinsic factor secretion. But again, it's kind of one of these new fad things, I think, where, I need more energy, I need to boost my metabolism, I'm going to get a vitamin B12 shot, and miraculously I'm going to lose weight or something like that. And that's not necessarily correlated at all. All right? So, I'm just going to kind of review this. Really, everything I've shown you here is what I want you to know. All right. I'm not going to require you to know the exact mechanism by which the parietal cell secretes hydrogen ions and secretes chloride. Okay. But do understand it's the same carbonic anhydrase activated reaction that we saw with the respiratory system. All right. That's how the hydrogen is produced. I will also tell you that this hydrogen that's being pumped out of the parietal cell, this is the proton pump I was talking about. So if you take a proton pump inhibiting drug, hydrogen is a proton, all right, it's got one positive charge. And so you're inhibiting this pump from sending out as much hydrogen, okay? And you're preventing the formation of hydrochloric acid in the stomach, all right? Hydrogen is secreted, and then chloride is separately secreted, and then they unite together in the stomach itself, right? And parietal cells do this. Also note that as you secrete hydrogen and chloride, look what you also do. What is this? Yeah, you reabsorb some bicarbonate, all right? So if you eat a really big meal, like Thanksgiving dinner, right, and your stomach's really having to produce a lot of acid to help digest that meal, you'll actually see your blood pH increase a little bit, right? So you'll see that if you're reabsorbing larger amounts of bicarbonate, you'll see the pH of your plasma change.
Just like fire. Was it affecting fire?
I mean, I don't know directly, yeah. You're gonna be secreting more bile just to process it all, yeah. All right. Parietal cells also have these receptors on them that allow them to be influenced by other hormones, right? So acetylcholine, like I mentioned, from the parasympathetic nervous system, increases hydrogen and chloride production, right? Gastrin, secreted from the G cells in the stomach, increases hydrochloric acid. And then histamine also does this. So not much is absorbed in the stomach. The stomach is mainly used to break things apart, all right, and move it into the small intestine. You get some water absorption, some ions, some fatty acids. Drugs are absorbed in the stomach, aspirin specifically, and alcohol is absorbed in the stomach. That's why also if you eat a fatty meal when you drink alcohol, it gives you more time to slowly absorb that alcohol than if you eat it on an empty stomach. You'll absorb it a lot faster because it's the only thing in the stomach, right? So it can focus on it 100%.
That's why you gotta layer the belly.
That's exactly right. That's why you layer. All right. And then high carb foods spend the least amount of time in the stomach. Protein rich foods are moderate, and high fat foods spend the most amount of time in the stomach. All right. All right. So just give me a few minutes to go over some of the diseases that can be caused. So one is peptic ulcer disease. So these are ulcers that you develop in the actual lining of the stomach itself. What do you think causes ulcers in the stomach? Acid. Okay. Yes. All right. So a lot of people think stress, anxiety. If you're a stressed person, if you're an anxious person, you're more risk to get stomach ulcers.
Isn't it like if you take medication without eating?
Oh, see, I don't think so. So all of these are theories out there that aren't actually true. So the real cause of stomach ulcers is a bacteria called H. pylori, all right? 66% of the people in the world have this bacteria, all right? You do not get stomach ulcers if you do not have this bacteria.
What's it called again?
H. pylori. Heliobacter pylori. Something like that. Is it on there? Heliobacter. Oh, yeah, Heliobacter. So, again, 66% of us have it. 66% of us don't have ulcers, right? So there are some people with this bacteria that are still at an increased risk for developing ulcers, right? And ulcers will destroy the mucosal lining of the stomach, and it makes it more difficult to absorb food, but you can also get perforations in the stomach because now you have these other tissue layers, the submucosa and whatnot, that are exposed to that hydrochloric acid. And if you get a perforation in your stomach, what happens? Yeah, chyme leaks out into your peritoneum and the peritoneal cavity, and it can be fatal. All right, so it's a disease you have to control carefully, usually with diet and medications. But there are certain environmental factors that can increase the risk of you developing ulcers should you have this bacteria as well. How do you get it? Feces. So most of you are probably not aware of how much feces you come into contact with on a daily basis. From people not washing their hands after going to the bathroom, and then handling utensils or handling plates, if some of you are looking at me disgusted. But yes, it's true. Your produce, right, in the grocery store. How many people are handling that produce? You got 30 people handling the same apple. You don't have any idea what their bathroom habits are. And it's not that anyone is actually wiping with their hands, all right? It's just contact, all right? Also saliva. If you swap saliva with somebody that has H. pylori, you are going to get H. pylori. So it's passed on very easily. Okay? Yes. All right, hold on. I got a couple minutes. I don't want to do the stomach next week. Vomiting. All right? What causes you to vomit? There are a few things. You actually have a vomiting control center in your brain, in the medulla region. But usually any irritation of the stomach or distension of the stomach will cause a mass contraction and relaxation of that lower esophageal sphincter, and you're going to vomit. Some people vomit more easily than other people. Probably again has to do with the ability to relax that sphincter. Infants. Have any of you guys heard of projectile vomiting from infants? So infants actually can have a condition where their pyloric sphincter does not relax. It stays contracted. So the stomach fills easily, and then you get this like exorcist-like vomit all over the room. All right, hold on. One more thing. Gastric bypass. I have 1 minute. All right, if you want to grab an afterward. This is how much of the stomach is removed in gastric bypass or in a gastric sleeve surgery. So you're literally removing more than half the stomach. This is gastric bypass. You just leave this little tiny pouch, and then you connect the stomach directly to the jejunum of the small intestine. You bypass the duodenum, so you actually really affect absorption of nutrients in this type of surgery. This is what a gastric band looks like. So you inflate the band so that this is really the only stomach that you have in order to hold food. All right, so if you have this type of surgery, like you can't drink caffeine anymore, you really have to change your diet. Yeah. And the other thing is, it's incredibly effective, except you can eat, and you can still get this little pouch to stretch. So some people will lose weight, and then they'll start gaining weight again, because that little bit of stomach they have left still has the ability to extend. You all can go ahead. Oh, attendance. Yeah, ew. I mean, go. Sorry, I don't want to hold you. Yeah, all right.